I don't know what to do anymore.
My name is Grace Ellen Whitmore. I'm 86 years old, a retired librarian from a quiet little town just outside Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. I spent my life between pages, fiction, history, love stories. But nothing I ever read prepared me for the horror I lived through after my husband died. The smell of his cologne still lingered in our bathroom mirror. It had only been 3 weeks since Harold passed, a heart attack in his sleep. No warning. Just gone. I had barely processed the loss, let alone the loneliness that came like a shadow every morning. But I never expected evil to follow the grief. Not so quickly. Not so violently. I still remember the sound of the front door creaking that Thursday afternoon. 5 of Harold's closest friends, David, Pete, Ron, Martin, and Bill, had come, they said, to pay their condolences. I let them in. I hugged them. They had been family to Harold for years. We'd hosted them for Christmas dinners and watched football in our living room. One of them even danced with me at my wedding. I trusted them. We sat, we shared stories. I cried. They comforted me. Then one of them suggested I freshen up. "You've been so strong, Grace," Pete said gently. "Go get a glass of water. Wash your face. We'll stay here and tidy up." I smiled faintly. Grief was like fog. I was exhausted. I nodded and went into the master bathroom. The moment I closed the door, I felt something was wrong. The lock didn't click like it normally did. But I didn't think much of it. I turned on the tap, splashed water on my face. That's when I heard the door open slowly behind me. I froze. My heart climbed into my throat. One by one, they came in. And then, I can't even bring myself to finish that sentence yet. But what they did, what they all did, broke something inside me that I didn't think could ever be broken again. I screamed, I fought. But they knew the house. They knew how far neighbors lived. They knew Harold wasn't there to protect me anymore. And when it was over, they left me there, shaking, crying, like I was trash. They didn't even slam the door behind them. I sat there on the cold tiles, blood mixing with water near my feet, and made one quiet promise. "You will regret walking into my house ever again." I know how this must sound. I'm just an old woman now. My skin hangs loose around my arms, and my hair, once golden, has gone silver and thin. But I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I was strong, independent, and very much in control of my life. Harold and I had been married for over 45 years. He was my second chance at love after my high school sweetheart passed from cancer. Harold was a tall gentleman, always in plaid shirts, always reading mystery novels, always telling dad jokes that made you groan but secretly laugh. We built this house together. We raised his only son here, from a previous marriage. I never had children of my own, but that boy, Trent, felt like a gift from God. I gave up promotions and overtime shifts just to be at his ball games. Harold's friends were part of our life from the start. They were the neighborhood men who helped him build the shed out back, who came over for poker on Fridays, who helped shovel our driveway in winter. They weren't strangers. They were like family. So when Harold's casket was lowered into the ground that cold morning, and I turned to see all 5 of them standing behind me in silence, I felt comforted, safe. But evil doesn't always come wearing a mask. Sometimes it wears familiar faces, ones that smile too politely, ones that pat your back a little too long. I had started noticing things even before that day. The way Pete lingered at Harold's funeral longer than the others. The strange tone Ron used when he said, "It's gonna be hard for you, all alone in this house now." Or how Martin rubbed my shoulder in a way that wasn't quite friendly but wasn't aggressive either. I chalked it up to grief. To men being clumsy with emotions. I was wrong. That Thursday morning, I made muffins. I wore Harold's favorite lavender housecoat. I lit a candle near his photo. When the men arrived that afternoon, I didn't suspect anything. They brought flowers. One brought wine. You need company, they said. They didn't even take off their shoes. One by one, they settled into the living room. They spoke of old fishing trips, cracked jokes, told me I still looked beautiful for my age. I laughed awkwardly. Pete opened the wine. He poured me a glass before I could say no. I sipped it slowly. Then came the moment. "Why don't you freshen up, Grace?" Martin said. "You've had such a rough time." He smiled like an uncle would. "We'll just clean up the place a bit." I didn't want to seem rude. These were Harold's best friends. But in that moment, the shift was too subtle to catch. Until the door opened behind me. People ask why women don't speak up. Especially older women. Well, what happens when the people you trusted most are the ones who violate you? What happens when there are 5 of them, and only one of you? When they're taller, stronger, younger? When no one would ever believe you because they're just sweet old friends of your late husband? I didn't call the police. I couldn't. Not yet. I just sat there, numb. But something inside me was awake. Something I thought died long ago when I retired. When Harold passed. When my bones started to ache, I stopped dancing in the kitchen. "That something," it whispered, "you are not done yet." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, clutching Harold's favorite hunting knife. The wine glass still sat on the table. Their fingerprints were still there. And I had cameras they didn't know about. Next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My niece, Beverly. She was a detective. And I only said 7 words. "I need to show you something horrifying." I hadn't heard Beverly's voice in over a decade. Not since she moved to Colorado after her falling out with her mother, my sister, Ruth. They'd clashed about everything. Church, career, politics. Ruth said Beverly had too much fire in her. Too much mouth. But I always thought Beverly had exactly what this family needed, a backbone. And now, I needed her. When she answered my call, her voice was quiet and cautious. "Hello." I swallowed. "Bev, it's Aunt Grace." Silence. Then, "Oh my God. Are you okay?" I couldn't even answer. My voice cracked like old wood. "I need you," I said. "It's urgent." She was on the next flight. By the time she pulled up in her little red rental car, my hands were still trembling. She hadn't even knocked when I opened the door. Her eyes scanned me head to toe. "You look thinner," she said carefully. "I'm older," I whispered. "And something terrible happened." I didn't waste time. I took her straight to the guest room, the one Harold had turned into his tech cave. He was always fiddling with wires and smart cameras, thinking we needed modern eyes on our old home. "Thank God Harold was paranoid," I said, pulling open the drawer with the hard drives. It took us 3 hours to go through all the footage. Most of it was grainy. Some had blank gaps. But then, we found it. The hallway cam. Facing the master bedroom. Time-stamped. Clear as day. At 2:14 p.m., Pete was the first to walk toward the bathroom door. At 2:15 p.m., Ron and Martin followed. At 2:17 p.m., David entered. Then Bill. No one looked at the camera. They didn't think so. I turned away as Beverly watched. She didn't say a word for a long time. Then, she pushed the laptop aside and grabbed my hand. "Do you want to go to the police?" I shook my head. Her brows furrowed. "Aunt Grace, this is beyond evil. We can have them locked up." "I know," I said quietly. "But not yet." She sat down on the floor, skimming through the letters like a detective piecing together a bomb. "These aren't just notes," she said slowly. "They're instructions, payments, assignments." "For what?" She turned the paper toward me. There, in Harold's unmistakable handwriting, were words I never imagined I'd read. "Package will be delivered to Grace. Ensure silence. No questions. Use all 5. My blood ran cold. "Grace, this is about you. Not Harold. Not them. You." I dropped to my knees. "I don't understand. Are you saying my husband knew what they would do to me?" Beverly didn't answer. Suddenly, my memories didn't feel like mine. All the times Harold told me I was too emotional, too forgetful, too dramatic. The way he kept me away from bank accounts, away from certain friends. The way he always said, "If anything happens to me, stay in the house. Trust no one." I thought he was protecting me, but maybe he was protecting something else. I ran my fingers over the letters, searching for answers. Beverly found a final envelope. One that hadn't been mailed. One still sealed. Inside was a flash drive, just labeled, "For her, if I die." We plugged it into the laptop. It took a minute to load. Then, a video played. It was Harold, sitting in his study, breathing heavily. "Grace, if you're watching this, then I'm probably dead." And it wasn't natural. Not really. My friends, they're involved in something. Something you were never meant to know. But you got too close. They told me they'd hurt you if I didn't cooperate. They said I owed them. Years ago, I did things. Dirty things. Back in the service. Secrets. So I gave them the house. Told them they could come by after I passed. To scare you off. To make sure you didn't find these letters. But I didn't know they'd go this far. I didn't think they'd touch you. I swear to God, Grace, I'm sorry. He looked straight into the camera. Eyes glassy. You were the only good thing I ever had. Please forgive me. Then it cut to black. I sat there stunned. How do you grieve a man who handed you over to wolves? How do you cry for a protector who became a coward? I wanted to scream. I wanted to bury him again, this time with the truth. But more than anything, I wanted revenge. Beverly sat beside me, silent, as if reading my mind. "You ready to make them pay?" she finally said. We started small. We documented everything. The hard drives. The footage. The flash drive. The letters. The text messages. The threatening visit. Beverly sent encrypted copies to 2 of her trusted colleagues in Denver, both female detectives. She gave them a code phrase: "If Grace stops calling, take it public." We also began tracing McAllister. Turns out, he wasn't just anyone. He was a known handler in a private blackmail ring that used military service records to manipulate retired veterans and their families. Harold had served under him in Nam. And those 5 friends, they weren't just drinking buddies. They were former operatives. 1 week later, I got a letter. No stamp. No sender. Just left in my mailbox. Inside was a single photo. It was me, sleeping in my bed. Last night. On the back, in red ink, it said, "Stop digging, or we dig your grave." I held the photo in my trembling hand. It was me. My face slack in sleep, mouth slightly open, my bedroom lamp casting a faint amber glow on the pillow beside me. Someone had stood over my bed and taken that picture. Close. Intimate. Like a predator documenting his prey. The words on the back weren't just a threat. They were a signature. A warning. I handed it to Beverly with shaking fingers. She stared at it in disbelief, then ran to the front porch to scan the neighborhood. Nothing. Just quiet, well-trimmed lawns and a breeze that rustled the hedges like whispers. "How the hell did they get inside?" she whispered. But I already knew. The back window. It always jammed slightly, even after Harold claimed he fixed it. For years, I thought Harold's quirks were just habits of age. The locked drawers. The late-night calls. The safes behind paintings. "Old war nerves," he'd say. But now I saw it clearly. My husband didn't live with guilt. He lived with alliances. He gave them access. To the house. To me. And now that we were digging, the very men who smiled through my husband's eulogy were watching me sleep. I stopped using the front bedroom that night. I moved to the laundry room. Slept on a cot with Beverly by the door, her service pistol in hand. I was too afraid to close my eyes. I kept hearing noises that might have been wind, or footsteps, shadows where there should have been none. They weren't done with me. They wanted to scare me into silence. But fear was no longer my enemy. It was fuel. The next morning, Beverly traced the old name, M. Callister, through military archives. Officially, he didn't exist. But Beverly had access to an unofficial database, one the government never liked civilians knowing about. Turns out, Marshal Callister had led an off-the-books op back in 1973. Deep cover, infiltration, human experiments. What was my husband involved in? That question haunted me more than the photo. Because I loved Harold. Even now. Even with all the blood on his hands. I sat in Harold's old leather recliner, the one that still held the shape of his shoulders. I ran my hand along the armrest and whispered, "Why?" There was no answer, just the creak of the floor upstairs. Beverly was supposed to be in the backyard. I stood slowly. My knees are weak. My heart is pounding in my ears. I reached for the cane Harold gave me on our 50th anniversary. Not just for balance anymore, but as a weapon. Each creaking step toward the stairs felt like a century. Then I heard it. Breathing. At the top of the stairs, I saw him. Pete. He was going through Harold's closet. I couldn't breathe. I didn't think so. I swung the cane with all the fury of 86 years of lies. It struck his shoulder, and he stumbled. "Grace, wait," he said, turning with wide eyes. "Why are you here?" I screamed. That's when Beverly stormed in, gun drawn. Pete raised both hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I swear. I came to warn you." "What are you talking about?" Beverly barked. Pete dropped to his knees. "They're going to kill you. All of you." I didn't know what they were planning until it was too late. The photo wasn't me. But I was there that night. I was in the van. I froze. "You watched?" I asked, my voice dry and trembling. He nodded. "I didn't touch you. I swear it. God, I was weak. I let them in. But now they've gone too far. Callister's not just covering Harold's secrets. He's silencing everyone tied to the old program." I backed away. I didn't trust him. But I needed what he knew. "Did Harold know?" I asked him. Pete hesitated, then nodded. "Harold agreed to silence you. To scare you." He didn't know what they were really going to do. And when he found out, he tried to pull out. I covered my mouth. Tears flooded my eyes. Beverly stepped between us. "Why now, Pete? Why come forward?" He looked at me. "Because you were always kind. And I'm tired of being part of monsters." Pete handed Beverly a flash drive. "This has the names. The money trail. The offshore accounts. Everything." Then he stood up. But before he could take a step, the living room window shattered. A bullet struck Pete's chest. He collapsed at my feet. Pete hit the hardwood floor with a thud that will echo in my ears until the day I die. I dropped to my knees beside him as blood soaked through the fibers of my living room rug, Harold's rug, the one we'd picked together on a trip to Vermont. Burgundy and beige, now stained crimson. Pete's lips moved, but no sound came out. "Stay with me," I cried. His eyes met mine, glassy and terrified. But I already knew. Pete was gone. Beverly yanked me back just as another bullet shattered a photo frame above the fireplace. "Down!" she shouted, grabbing the gun from her waistband. We crawled behind the couch, Beverly checking the windows with precise eyes. She whispered fast. "They're not sending threats anymore. This is a hit." My pulse pounded through my temples. My heart beat so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I looked at Pete's lifeless body. A man who watched monsters hurt me. A man who helped them, then tried, too late, to make it right. I didn't know whether to mourn him or spit on his grave. But I didn't have time to decide. Beverly pointed toward the back door. "We move on 3. Ready?" I nodded, my whole body trembling. The only thing that steadied me was fury. She kicked open the back door and fired 2 warning shots. Glass shattered again from the kitchen window, but Beverly was faster. She pulled me behind the garden shed and toward the old greenhouse at the edge of the yard. Then she stopped. "Do you remember what Harold built under here?" she asked. It hit me like lightning. The storm shelter. Harold had dug it during the Cold War, just in case the Ruskies dropped the bomb, he used to joke. We hadn't used it in 30 years. But the key was still around my neck. I fumbled with the padlock, hands slick with sweat. Beverly scanned the tree line. Then we slipped inside. There was no light in the shelter, just darkness and stale air. But we were alive. I sat in silence, knees pulled to my chest, breathing in the damp scent of concrete, earth, and mildew. Beverly sat beside me, her gun still drawn, back pressed against the wall. We didn't speak for almost an hour. Then I finally whispered, "Do you think they'll come down here?" "No," she said. "They'll think we ran. They want a clean kill, not a basement brawl." We sat in that tomb, surrounded by boxes of old crackers, rusted flashlights, and relics of a fear-driven past. It felt familiar, because for the past few months, I'd been buried too. Beneath silence, shame, confusion. But now I was alive in the dark. Once we caught our breath, Beverly opened the flash drive Pete handed her before he was killed. It was encrypted, but she cracked it in minutes. Inside were dozens of documents, spreadsheets, transaction logs, surveillance reports, and photos. Photos of me. Some from the grocery store, the church parking lot, the cemetery. They had been watching me for years. There were also files labeled with code names. Project Hearth, OP Silvertongue, and one simply labeled Widow. My hands went cold. Beverly whispered, "This wasn't just about Harold's past. This was a program. You were a target." I read the documents in pieces. My eyes blurred from the screen, from the betrayal, from the exhaustion. The truth unraveled like a noose tightening around my neck. My husband had been part of a covert government operation that preyed on war widows of former intelligence agents. Women who unknowingly inherited secrets or property tied to national threats. And Harold, he had volunteered my name. He had filed me like a folder. As manageable. As non-combative. As easy to silence. They didn't just hurt me because I was his wife. They hurt me because I was in the way. Because I knew nothing. And that made me dangerous. I curled into myself, rocking like I had the night Harold died. Only this time, the grief wasn't fresh. It was rotten, twisted. How could a man I loved for 45 years do this? Was every kiss a lie? Was every Sunday dinner a cover? Beverly didn't say anything. She just placed her hand on mine. I could feel the tears on her palm, but she wouldn't let herself cry. Not until it was over. Suddenly, Beverly's burner phone buzzed. One ring. Then silence. She picked it up. There was only static at first. Then a man's voice, deep, deliberate. Grace Whitmore. If you value what's left of your life, stop. Walk away. Take your little niece and vanish. You have one chance. The line cut. No number. No way to trace it. But the threat wasn't new. What was new was that he said my name, not as a victim, but as a threat. That evening, I stepped outside to water my azaleas, and found my garden gate open. Nailed to the tree beside it was Beverly's police badge, blood smeared across the center. The blood on Beverly's badge wasn't dry. I stood in the garden barefoot, the hose still running, water soaking into the ground like the truth itself wanted to drown. The morning air smelled of roses, wet earth, and fear. She'd gone out for milk 20 minutes earlier. Said she'd be back at 10. I didn't hear a struggle. No engine screeching. No scream. Just the wind brushing leaves. And now this. Her badge. Left like a signature. They didn't kill her yet. No. If they had, they wouldn't have warned me. This was a message. Beverly wasn't just my niece. She was the only soul in this broken world who stood beside me when everything cracked. When I couldn't sleep. When I bled and shook and screamed through nightmares. She never flinched. Even as her job was threatened. Her name dragged in whispers. She never walked away. Now someone had taken her. And this time, I wasn't waiting in the dark. I went back into the house, my legs buckling beneath me, my hand gripping the kitchen counter. I stared at Harold's old tea kettle and the note he once taped to it. Water will boil. Just be ready. I stared at that stupid note, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. They thought I was boiled. But I was just getting ready. On the kitchen table sat the flash drive Pete had given us. We had copied it to the cloud. But now, the original was missing. Gone. In its place, a blackened USB stick, melted beyond use, and a single sticky note. You should have stayed a widow. Kennedy came rushing back around noon. I showed him the badge. His face turned to stone. I had eyes on her until she turned onto Ridgeway Road, he said. Camera feeds went down 5 minutes later. They knew, I whispered. They were waiting. Kennedy checked the yard. We need to relocate. Now. I shook my head. No. If we run, we'll spend our lives hiding. I'm not letting them hurt you. I looked him square in the eye. They already did. They broke everything I loved. Except this. I placed my hand over my chest. My voice. And now. They'll hear it everywhere. That evening, I sat in front of my old laptop and recorded a video. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. Not this time. I looked straight into the webcam and said, My name is Grace Ellen Whitmore. I'm 86 years old. I was married to Harold Whitmore for 45 years. On the week of his death, I was assaulted by 5 of his so-called friends, men who claimed to love and honor his memory. But it wasn't grief that brought them to my door. It was a plan Harold knew about, a plan tied to government black projects, dirty operations, and secrets meant to be buried with me. I uploaded the video to a hidden cloud account, gave Beverly's lawyer the login, set it to auto-release if neither of us logged in within 72 hours. Then we waited. I sat at my kitchen table that night, drinking peppermint tea, staring at Harold's empty chair. The one he always sat in when we played Scrabble. The one he held my hand from when the chemo got bad. And I asked him out loud, "Was I ever your home?" No answer, of course. Just the tick of the old wall clock. Time, like betrayal, doesn't stop for grief. We made it look easy. Beverly left town. I turned the porch lights off, left the back door unlocked, just like before. But what they didn't know was that the garden lights now had cameras inside, that every bush had motion sensors, that I wasn't the only one in the house. Kennedy was positioned in the attic, armed and watching. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I heard the gravel crunch in the driveway. I didn't move. 3 silhouettes crept toward the back entrance, same door they'd used that awful day. This time, they wore masks and gloves. But I knew them by posture. Ron, Martin, Bill, the last of Harold's loyal crew. I gripped my cane beneath the kitchen table. The door creaked. They stepped inside. "Hello, boys," I said, standing slowly. They froze. Bill cursed under his breath. "She's supposed to be asleep." "No," I said. "I've been awake since the day you broke me." Ron reached for something in his jacket, but before he could pull it, Beverly kicked open the basement door, gun drawn. "Move and I drop you," she growled. The men turned, startled. And from the attic, Kennedy's voice echoed. "Don't even breathe wrong. This place is wired." The men hesitated. Then Ron spoke. "This doesn't end here, you crazy old." "I'm not crazy," I snapped. "I'm just done being quiet." We zip-tied their hands. Called in Beverly's contacts from the local department, ones not bought by Callister's money. It was 4:47 a.m. when the last squad car pulled out of my driveway with Martin and Bill in the back seat, eyes down, mouths shut. I watched them go from my rocking chair. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was tired. So tired. At sunrise, Beverly's burner phone buzzed again. This time, a voice came through. Calm. Deadly. "Congratulations, Grace. You caught the puppets. But what will you do when the puppet master walks into the room?" She didn't reply. He continued. "We let you win that one. We wanted to see how far you'd go. You surprised us. And then, chillingly, now let's see how you handle losing." That evening, I stepped outside to water my azaleas, and found my garden gate open. Nailed to the tree beside it was Beverly's police badge, blood smeared across the center. The GPS coordinate led to a church I hadn't stepped foot in since Harold's funeral. St. Jude's Chapel, an old, wood-paneled sanctuary off Route 17. It had once held our wedding vow renewal. And now, it was the site of what might be my final hour. I brought no phone, no tracking device, just a cross necklace Beverly gave me 10 Christmases ago. I wore it like armor. The moment I opened the heavy door, the scent of burnt wax and mildew hit me. She was there. Beverly, tied to a chair, mouth gagged, bruised, but alive. From the shadows, a slow clap echoed. And then he stepped forward. Marshal Callister. Exactly as I imagined. Slick gray suit, polished shoes, eyes that didn't blink. "You really are something, Grace," he said softly. "Harold always said you had fire. We thought that fire would die with him. You tried to bury it under blood," I said. "You failed." He smirked. "This isn't about you. You were never the target. You're just the warning." I stepped closer. "I'm not afraid of you." He chuckled. Then let's give you a reason. He lifted a remote and pressed a button. A timer began to count down. 3 minutes. Bomb. I asked. No, he said. Gas. You'll sleep through the fire. He left through a back door. I ran to Beverly, yanked off her gag. Can you walk? She nodded weakly. Together, we broke through the old stained glass window on the side. I shielded her as we rolled onto the muddy grass. We crawled as the building behind us hissed, and then burst into flames. The fire danced in the sky like a funeral pyre. But we weren't in the coffin. The hospital kept her overnight. She had bruised ribs, dehydration. But she lived. And when she woke up, she grabbed my hand. You got me out, she whispered. No, I said, brushing her hair back. We got each other out. The fire was ruled suspicious. The footage of Callister at the gas station near the church went viral. Anonymous sources confirmed he was being investigated for black site operations. But he had vanished. No trace. No signature. No shadow. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Inside, a newspaper clipping from 1978. The headline: Young woman dies in secret army training accident. Husband keeps silence. And scribbled at the bottom, Harold lied about more than just you. The woman in the article was named Margaret Layton. She died during one of Callister's early experiments. Psychological resilience under threat, the article said. But the name, Layton, stirred something. I flipped through Harold's old journals, buried in the attic under floorboards I hadn't touched in 20 years. And I found it. ML equals buried truth. It took me hours, but I traced the woman. Margaret wasn't a stranger. She was Harold's first wife. Before me. They kept it secret. She had known too much. She tried to go public. Callister had her eliminated. And Harold? He signed the order. Not because he hated her, but because he believed in duty. My husband had once chosen silence over love, and now, decades later, I was the last one with a voice. I returned to St. Jude's. All that remained was ash and silence. I scattered Margaret's photo in the ruins. You deserved better, I whispered. Then I turned toward the future. 3 days later, he sent another message. A video. To my email. Grace, you've proven your worth. But there are others who won't survive your crusade. Stop, or they'll burn. In the background of the video, I saw a child's toy. My neighbor's granddaughter's doll. They were threatening children now. I clutched my cross. Callister wasn't just a killer. He was a legacy. One I intended to end. I sent one final message to every news station. I'm done hiding. This Sunday at 10 a.m., I will reveal everything on live stream. If anything happens to me before then, drop the tapes. And then I stood by the window, waiting. At 9:59 a.m., the world watched. CNN, YouTube, local stations, Facebook Live. I sat in my living room, wearing a blue cardigan Harold bought me 30 years ago. Beverly sat beside me. Camera on. Microphone live. I spoke for 12 minutes. Every detail. The abuse. The blackmail. The corruption. Harold's betrayal. Margaret's death. Callister's reign. I ended with this. I am not a hero. I am a broken woman who refused to stay broken. If they silence me after this, so be it. But I won't die ashamed. I hit send. The full files went to every major journalist and whistleblower account online. The video was shared over 80 million times in 3 days. Senators opened investigations. A task force was launched. Callister's bank accounts were frozen. And then, finally, on the 10th day, he was caught. A tip in Guatemala. Hiding under a new name. The man who tried to bury me was finally caged. Pete was buried with no ceremony. But I visited his grave anyway. I forgave you, I whispered. Beverly transferred departments, now working in federal witness protection. And me. I still sleep with the porch light on. But not because I'm scared. Because I survived. One morning, I found a handwritten note in my mailbox. You don't know me, but I'm the daughter of Margaret Layton. I never knew what happened to her. Until now. You gave me the truth. You gave me peace. You gave her voice back. Thank you, Grace. I clutched the letter to my chest and wept. Not because I was broken, but because I had finally healed. They tried to make me disappear, but I became unforgettable instead. It had been 6 months since Callister's arrest. The trials were long, messy, and saturated with news cameras, legal threats, and redacted files. Government officials denied everything. Some resigned quietly. Others screamed conspiracy. But my face was everywhere. Grace Ellen Whitmore, America's grandmother with a backbone. I had never wanted fame. I only wanted peace. And maybe a little justice. I sat on the porch each evening, wrapped in my navy shawl, listening to the cicadas hum. People sent me letters from all over the country. Survivors, widows, veterans' wives. Some with similar stories, some with only questions. I read every single one, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. One letter stood out. It came in a torn yellow envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo. A much younger me, college-aged, sitting at a diner counter, smiling, completely unaware that the man behind the camera would one day orchestrate my ruin. There was a note taped to the back. You lived. I didn't. Make it matter. No signature. Just a smudge of lipstick at the bottom. That night, I stayed up thinking about all the women who never got to speak. Margaret, the girl in the photo. Maybe even others Harold never told me about. I thought about what Beverly said in the hospital. You gave me the strength to keep fighting. And something settled in me. A quiet decision. I took my story and turned it into something more. With Beverly's help, I partnered with 2 journalists and 1 former intelligence officer. Together, we launched a foundation, the Widow's Ledger, a non-profit dedicated to tracking unreported abuses tied to military secrecy and classified operations. We offered legal help, housing, therapy. But more than anything, we offered voice. We gave women back their names. Every time someone rang the office bell, I thought of that bathroom floor, of how I felt like nothing. And every time we opened a new case, I whispered to the universe, see? I became something. Then, one rainy afternoon, I got a call I never expected. It was Callister's lawyer. He wants to speak with you, he said. Just once. He's dying. I almost hung up. But I didn't. Because I wanted to see the monster at his weakest. I wanted to look him in the eye, not for revenge, but to see if evil could ever feel shame. They brought him into the prison hospital, gaunt and gray. He looked older than me now. Tubes in his nose. Skin like wet parchment. He didn't smile. He simply said, "You cost me everything." "No," I replied. "You did that yourself." He coughed. "They'll keep going. Even after I'm gone. You didn't end it." "I didn't have to," I said, standing. "I just had to expose it." As I turned to leave, he croaked, "Do you forgive me?" I paused in the doorway. I don't forgive monsters. I outlive them. That night, he died. Peacefully, they said. But evil should never get peace. So I lit a candle. Not for him. For Margaret. For Pete. For all of them. I still keep Harold's photo on my bookshelf. Some days I talk to it. Other days I turn it face down. Healing isn't straight. It's messy. Loud in quiet places. Silent during storms. But healing came. In whispers, in letters, in every footstep I took outside my house without looking over my shoulder. I still keep the garden gate locked now. Not out of fear, but because I finally know how much I'm worth. And no one gets to take that from me again. Spring arrived quietly that year. The cherry blossoms in my front yard bloomed a little earlier than usual. Neighbors waved more often. Reporters finally stopped calling. And for once, I wasn't waiting for a knock at the door. I was sitting on the porch, rocking slowly, when Beverly came up the steps carrying a manila envelope. "Mail came late," she said, handing it to me. It wasn't postmarked. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a worn photograph. A group of women. Young, smiling, dressed in military uniforms from decades ago. And there, at the end, was Margaret Layton. She was laughing, holding a file in her hand. But the back of the photo chilled me. 6 names were circled in red ink. And only one wasn't crossed out. Mine. There was no note. No explanation. But I didn't need one. This wasn't over. Not completely. "I thought Callister was the end," Beverly whispered, reading my face. "He was the last man standing," I said. "But not the last hand pulling strings." We had always assumed the operation died with him. But that photo, it was a message. Someone else was still watching. I brought it inside, placed it in the fireproof box with everything else. Harold's letters, Pete's files, Beverly's badge. I wasn't afraid. Just aware. That night, I sat with a pen in my hand and started writing my will. Not the legal one. The real one. The one meant for the woman who'd find my name years from now and wonder if I had been brave or broken. And I wrote this. If you're reading this, then you're the next one they tried to silence. Don't let them. You're not alone. I was like you once. And I survived. You will too. Use my name. Scream it. Make it louder than there's ever was. And when they come for you, remind them who you are. You are the storm they didn't plan for. I signed it, folded it, and tucked it beneath my cross. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. And I smiled. Because sometimes, survival isn't just living. Sometimes, it's becoming the warning for those who think old women forget how to fight. The rain started around midnight. I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had shifted. Like my bones were carrying secrets now. Not just mine, but every woman's secret who was told to sit down, shut up, and smile through it. I sat by the window, the soft patter of rain hitting the glass, and thought about all the names on that photograph. 6 women. 5 crossed out. 1 left. Me. They had eliminated everyone who tried to tell the truth. Margaret, the nurse from the Nevada base, the translator from Angola, the communications officer from Camp Ridge. I'd looked them all up after the fire. Their deaths were accidents, illness, natural causes. Nothing about what happened to them had been natural. What haunted me now wasn't the violence. I had faced that. It was the silence. The careful, government-stamped silence. A week passed. Then 2. And just as I began to believe I might finally be allowed to grow old in peace, I saw her. A young woman. Standing on the edge of my driveway. Soaked in the rain. Holding nothing but a notebook. She didn't speak at first. Just stared at me with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. I walked out slowly. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded. I didn't know where else to go. She was maybe 21. No umbrella. No coat. Her hands were trembling. I saw your story, she said. My mom, she's gone. But before she died, she left a name in her journal. Yours. I felt everything in me still. What's your name? I asked gently. Eva. I opened the screen door wider. Come inside, Eva. She stepped in like a girl walking into a church after years in the wilderness. And I knew in that moment, this was how it began again. I made her tea, sat her down, handed her a blanket, just like I'd done for those 5 monsters once. But this time it felt right. She told me her mother had been a clerk on a research base in Arizona in the 90s. She'd gotten pregnant after filing a whistleblower report. The man vanished. She raised Eva in hiding. Never told her anything until the week she died. She said they'd come for me too, Eva whispered. She said you were the only person who ever beat them. I looked at this girl, this orphan of secrets, and understood. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. I gave her the bedroom Harold used to sleep in, changed the sheets, lit a lavender candle. And that night, before going to bed, I pulled out a new journal and wrote on the first page, For Eva. For Margaret. For all of them. I didn't need to carry the fire alone anymore, because now, I was passing it on. And maybe, just maybe, Eva would burn down what I couldn't finish. Eva stayed for 6 days before she spoke again in full sentences. She wandered the house like a shadow. She helped with dishes, organized my books without being asked, and sat with me on the porch each evening without saying a word. But behind those quiet eyes was something fierce, something bruised but not broken. On the 7th night, she handed me her mother's journal. It was water-stained and cracked, but still legible. Inside were pages filled with code names, dates, sketches, maps. Some of it matched what Pete had passed to us. Some of it went even deeper. There were coordinates I didn't recognize. And one name I hadn't heard before. Alba R. Beverly ran the name through every database she could access. Nothing. No birth certificate. No license. No government records. But Eva said Alba wasn't a name. It was a place. A training ground in the Utah desert where her mother said they did tests. What kind of tests? I asked. Eva's hands tightened around her teacup. On women, she whispered. They called them resilience simulations. I felt my skin crawl. How many programs were still running? How many files still sealed? I wanted to protect her. I wanted to pack her a bag, drive her to the ocean, and tell her to start a new life somewhere quiet. But I saw it in her eyes. She didn't come here for escape. She came for instruction. Will you teach me? She asked one morning. Teach you what? To survive. I took a long breath, then nodded. Each day after that, we trained. As much as an old woman with bad knees and a cane could teach a 21-year-old girl raised in silence. We reviewed documents, taught her how to vet a source, spot a lie, taught her how to speak in a room full of people who think they're smarter, and how to wait for the moment they expose themselves. One night, I found her at the kitchen table, crying softly over a page from her mother's journal. I wrapped my arms around her from behind. Your mother didn't just survive, I said. She passed her voice to you. Eva turned to me. I'm scared, Grace. Good, I said. That means you'll move carefully. She laughed a little. Then she stood up and said something I'll never forget. I want to go there. To Alba. I want to see it. I want to show the world. It terrified me, But it also thrilled me, because I had once sat in this very room, battered and betrayed, telling myself I'd never be strong enough. And now, here she was, my echo. The next morning, Beverly gave her a burner phone and a false ID. We packed her a bag. I slipped a note into her jacket pocket when she wasn't looking. Come home when you're done wrecking them. And she left. Just like that. No goodbye. Only purpose. I spent the next 2 weeks watching the news, checking dead drops, waiting for word. Nothing. Then one morning, I received an email from an encrypted address. No subject. Just one line. Phase 1 complete. The gate is open. Attached was a photograph. Eva, standing at the edge of a fenced-off military compound, wearing my cross. She wasn't just surviving. She was beginning. And I, for the first time in my life, felt peace. Not because evil was gone, but because the truth was no longer mine alone to carry. The world didn't notice her at first. Eva moved quietly. She embedded herself in a veterans housing clinic in Salt Lake City under a fake name. She volunteered in their records room, sorted paperwork, filed transfer forms, scrubbed bathrooms. She did whatever it took to stay invisible. And it worked. For weeks, no one questioned the soft-spoken girl with sharp eyes. But she was watching, recording, collecting. At night, she wrote me long messages, encrypted, always vague, always signed the same way, your storm. She found blacklists. Names of widows who had filed claims that were buried within hours. Unborn children flagged for surveillance. Entire towns where compensation funds had been siphoned into fake shell foundations. She found proof that Project Widow never ended. It had just shifted names, new offices, new departments, new methods, same sickness. And then one morning, she disappeared. No email, no signal, no sign of life. I waited 3 days before contacting Beverly. We traced her last message to a burner tower outside Moab. And then, silence. I thought I'd lost her. Until the 6th night, just after dusk, when I stepped out to grab the mail and found a newspaper on the porch. Folded in half. Plastic wrapper. No return address. Inside was a headline circled in red. Explosion rocks Federal Archive facility in Utah. No fatalities confirmed. Below it, a sticky note with handwriting I recognized. They don't own the truth anymore. Love, E. I collapsed onto the porch swing, tears rolling down my cheeks. She was alive. And she had made her first move. That explosion. It wasn't just destruction. It was release. A leak followed. Dozens of files uploaded to open forums, whistleblower websites, and encrypted servers. Government contracts. Surveillance orders. Abandoned training sites. Budget logs. Names. Coordinates. Crimes. My name showed up too. Under a section labeled Contingent Control, Priority Subjects. They had tried to erase me. But now the world was reading about me over their morning coffee. A week later, the phones at the widow's ledger rang nonstop. Some women were furious. Some sobbed. Some simply said, I thought I was crazy. We told them, no. You were silenced. But now you speak. Eva reappeared 2 weeks later, not in person, but through a conference link at a veterans summit in D.C. She wore a blazer. Hair pulled back. Calm. Unshaken. She spoke for exactly 6 minutes and 39 seconds. And the world changed. Because Eva wasn't alone on that stage. She brought 7 women with her. Each from a different state. Each with their own story of secrecy, threats, and betrayal. And they all began with the same phrase. I'm here because of Grace Whitmore. I watched from my living room, hand over my heart, tears sliding down my cheek. I hadn't died in vain. I had lived just long enough to see the seed take root. Eva closed her speech with this: "There is no such thing as a powerless woman. Only ones you haven't pissed off yet. You pissed us off." And with that, she left the podium. The applause didn't stop for 3 full minutes. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, the same one where I had first looked into my reflection and wondered if anyone would believe me. Now, I believed in me, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I slept with my door unlocked. And I dreamed not of screams, but of 7 women walking through a door that used to be bolted shut, and turning around to hold it open for the rest. The next morning, I received a call from someone I never expected. A senator's aide. She spoke carefully, like every word was being recorded. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, "the senator would like to formally invite you to Washington. He believes your testimony could help draft legislation aimed at protecting widows of federal contractors and veterans." I didn't say anything at first. Not because I was surprised, but because I had waited my whole life for someone to finally say those words. I agreed. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane for the first time in 12 years. Beverly came with me. She joked that I looked like a blonde Ruth Bader Ginsburg in my navy suit. I told her I felt like a ticking bomb dressed as a grandma. The Senate chamber was colder than I expected. The kind of cold that isn't from air conditioning, but from decades of stone and silence. They gave me 10 minutes. I used 20. I told them everything. And when I finished, there was nothing but silence in the room. Not because they weren't listening, but because they were. One of the younger congresswomen, maybe Eva's age, stood and crossed the room to shake my hand. "You've started something we can't ignore anymore," she said. "Thank you for not giving up." I wanted to say something profound. Instead, I said, "I'm 86. Giving up isn't on my calendar." When I returned home, the mailbox was overflowing. Not with threats, but with gratitude. Cards. Drawings from grandchildren. Handwritten letters from women who finally had names for what had been done to them. Even one from a man, a retired pilot, who admitted he had stood by and watched his commanding officers do things to local women overseas he never spoke about. He wrote, "I thought silence was safer, but now I see it's poison. You reminded me that silence isn't peace. It's cowardice. Thank you for giving an old man permission to finally say it out loud." I pinned his letter above my fireplace. It stayed there until the day I couldn't climb the stairs anymore. Time passed. My steps slowed. Beverly retired and moved just 3 blocks down to keep an eye on me. Eva kept fighting. She became more than a whistleblower. She became a movement, a woman with no title but all the power. One night, years later, I heard a knock at the door. I shuffled slowly, opened it, and there she stood. Eva. Older now. Sharper. Softer in the eyes. She hugged me tight. "I needed to come home for a minute," she whispered. She stayed for 3 days. And on the 3rd, she sat at my table and said, "They offered me a seat on a national security ethics board. They want me to help rewrite the guidelines." And I asked. She looked up, smiling. I said yes. "But I'm only going if I can bring your story into the curriculum." I leaned back in my chair. "That's what justice looks like, Eva," I said. "Not punishment, not revenge, but building something better than what they tried to destroy." She held my hand, and I knew, deep in my bones, that when I left this world, I wasn't leaving empty. I was leaving a flame, one they couldn't put out. That night, as I sat beside my window and watched the moon hang over the trees, I whispered a name to the wind. Margaret. And for the first time, I didn't cry, because I knew, wherever she was, She finally knew someone listened. And someone answered. I kept the porch light on every night, not because I feared they'd return, but because I hoped someone else, like Eva once had, might find their way to my door. And one evening, someone did. She was younger than Eva, barely 19, with a backpack that looked too heavy for her frame and eyes that said she hadn't slept in days. I opened the door before she even knocked. She froze, rain dripping from her eyelashes. Are you Mrs. Whitmore? I nodded. Grace, please. She stepped forward, trembling. My name is Celia. My grandmother was one of the original whistleblowers in the 60s. She died in a fire. They called it an accident, but she left me letters about something called Project Hearth. About a woman she met once at a library who told her never to stop speaking. She opened her backpack and pulled out a bundle of wrinkled pages, water-stained and taped together. I held them gently in my lap. The handwriting was familiar. Not my own, but Margaret's. My hand covered my mouth. She had written to this girl's grandmother. And now, decades later, her words had arrived at my doorstep again, carried through generations of silence and fear. I poured us both some tea. Celia sat where Eva once had, where Beverly first examined files, where I once crumbled and swore I'd never rise again. And I listened. She had seen things. Online. In her community. Among women whose husbands were contracted and never came home. She spoke of a program still rumored to be active in a new form, tied to international aid and private security. She wanted to investigate, but didn't know where to start. You already did, I said. That night, I didn't sleep. I read every letter in Celia's bundle. Names, base locations, dates, journal entries from terrified women and forgotten wives. Women who vanished after speaking up. Women whose children still wondered what really happened. The pain was recycled. But now, so was the fight. I called Eva the next morning. There's someone you need to meet, I said. Eva flew in that same weekend. When she saw Celia, she smiled like she was looking at a reflection from years ago. You have that look, Eva told her. The one that says you're scared, but you'll still show up. Celia nodded. Then come with me, Eva said. They left that same evening. But not before Celia hugged me goodbye and slipped something into my hand. It was a pin. A small bronze flame. You lit this, she whispered. I held that pin long after they were gone. And I realized something. You don't need to carry a torch forever. You just have to keep it lit long enough for someone else to grab it.